Hi there and welcome to another book review. Today I'm talking about Death Valley by Melissa Broder. If you are thinking of checking out Death Valley yourself, you don't have to worry about any spoilers in this video. The first part of my reviews are always spoiler free, so you can see if this book is your cup of tea. After a quick summary and a basic review, I will give a spoiler warning and then do a deep dive into everything that happens in the book as well as my opinions on it. These are some content warnings for Death Valley by Melissa Broder. Death Valley starts with our narrator arriving at a Best Western in the middle of the desert. She is navigating anticipatory grief over her father and complicated feelings for her husband who suffers from a disabling illness. One of the clerks at the Best Western mentions a hike that's close to the hotel. Our narrator takes off on this trail several times, and during her hikes she spends a lot of time thinking about grief, dying, empathy, compassion, and loss. So real quick, let's do a run through of my rating system. 1 star means that I could not finish the book. 2 stars means that I struggled to finish it, but I did. 3 stars means it was good, I enjoyed it. 4 means I really liked it and would recommend it to a friend. And 5 stars, which is my highest honor, means I would read the book again. I gave Death Valley a 4-star rating because while I enjoyed it and I would recommend it to a friend, I would not read this book again. I was actually surprised at how much I ended up enjoying this one, given as how there are a lot of magical realism elements incorporated in this story. But overall, the elevated writing style and the nuanced, complicated, and interesting threads of thought about death, grief, loss, compassion, and intimacy all really helped this story earn a 4-star rating from me. We are now entering the spoiler-filled part of this video, so if Death Valley sounds like your cup of tea, now is a good time to pause the video, go read it, and then come back so that you can engage with my thoughts and opinions on this book. At the start of Death Valley, our nameless narrator arrives at a Best Western in the middle of the desert. For the past couple of months, she's been visiting her father in the hospital following a car accident that's left him in and out of consciousness. We also learned that her husband suffers from an undiagnosed illness that has disabled him, makes it so that periodically he's bedridden for months at a time. There are 2 clerks at this Best Western named Jethra and Zip, and when our narrator lies and says that she's planning to go for a hike, Jethra recommends a trail that's close to the hotel. Though our narrator is not the outdoorsy type, she decides to go on the adventure and follow the trail anyway. While hiking on the trail the first time, she comes across an enormous cactus. She goes inside of the cactus and while spending some time in there, sees visions of her father as a young child. The next day, she finds out from her mother that her dad has come out of his most recent coma, and the narrator returns to the desert, goes for the hike again, and again finds the giant cactus. This time, while inside the cactus, she sees visions of her father as a teenager and the 2 of them smoke together, but she also sees a vision of her husband as a young child, and this smoking bothers her child husband because he has asthma. The next day, she decides she's going to check out of the hotel and go back to Los Angeles, but before making the trip home, she decides to stop at the trail one last time to see if the giant cactus is there. While she's walking, she realizes that the cactus isn't there, and since it had normally been blocking her path before, this time she's able to go for a longer hike deeper into the desert. She ends up getting lost, falling down the side of a mountain, and spraining her ankle. At this time, she thinks to herself, "It hits me then. Whatever I'm doing, this is actually dangerous. Something bad could happen." As it gets dark, it's more difficult for her to figure out where she is and how to get back to her car, and she becomes more and more lost. She thinks, I don't know if there's such a thing as officially lost or what makes a person maybe lost versus sort of lost versus lost. There were times in my life when I felt totally lost and then realized I was only sort of lost or not lost at all. There were other times when I felt not lost and later realized I was completely lost. Most of these were emotional. While she's trying to make her way back to her car, she drops her phone and cracks it, and it also eventually goes dead. Though she is able to build herself a fire when she ends up sleeping out in the desert at night, she also runs out of water and becomes more and more thirsty as time goes on. As she's crawling around the desert with her sprained ankle and no water, she thinks about her father's illness, her husband's illness, and her ability to have empathy and compassion for others. She also ends up reflecting a lot on the reality of death. After thinking about eating a flower and then then deciding not to just in case it's poisonous, she thinks, "The flower falls to the ground. I continue on my arid crawl, and it dawns on me then that I must really want to live, and it surprises me." The narrator ends up finding a cactus that's split open, and she eats the guts of the cactus to get a little bit of moisture, but this also ends up giving her a stomach ache, which arguably makes her situation worse. A bird comes to her in the desert, and she takes this as a sign that her father has passed away. After her interaction with the bird, she realizes she actually knows where she is, and she once again finds the giant cactus in the spot where it had disappeared from the day before. She spends some time sitting inside the cactus until she hears Zip and Jethra walking around looking for her, and she's able to crawl close enough to them that she can throw a rock and get their attention, and then she's on her way to the hospital. Her mother comes to see her in the hospital, and our narrator learns that her father actually did not die despite what she believed. And then after a little while, her husband joins her, and we end the book with the two of them cuddled up in the hospital bed together. I always like to start first with the things that I liked about a book, and for this one, a huge part of that was the imagery. From the beginning of the story, we know where we're at in the desert, and we get tons and tons of imagery of the different kinds of cacti in the area, the rabbits, lizards. As she's crawling through the desert trying to get out, we really have such a vivid idea of how everything looks and feels and even tastes based on her experience, and that was something I really appreciated about this piece. I also felt like this book had a really good hold on the themes of grief, death, empathy, illness, and loss. We see the narrator struggling through her relationships with her father and with her husband, and through the sort of magically realistic visions of the two of them in various stages of their life. And by the end of the book, we do see the narrator come to some realizations about the way that she deals with this grief and loss and how she connects with others. The primary bulk of this book is reading about her experiences, visions, or hallucinations, if you want to think of them that way, and her thoughts on the experience of being there while her father is dying. That means that while you're reading, for the most part, you're engaging in a lot of critical thinking about these things, which I thought was fine because I thought that the narrator's thoughts were pretty interesting. But if you're the kind of person who likes a more plot-driven story, then this might not be the book for you. When it comes to criticisms, I don't really have a whole lot of things that I really didn't like about this book. One thing is that I'm not a huge magical realism kind of person, so that is definitely something that just makes this not necessarily perfect for me. But I do think that this book set out to accomplish something, and it really did accomplish that thing. If you enjoy magical realism and you're ready for a book that deals with some of these heavy topics like grief and death and what empathy really is, then this might be a great read for you. All in all, I really thought this was a good read, and it flew by. I read it in less than 2 hours, I think, and so I gave it a solid 4 stars. As always, you can follow me on Instagram and Goodreads to learn more about what I'm reading now and what I plan to read next. Thanks for watching.